Caitlin is a player who can play on and off the ball. Raven is a point guard that primarily has had the ball in her hands, and so I think it gives us some versatility.
That was the shot across the bow, the quiet alarm reverberating through every WNBA front office. If you believed the Caitlin Clark wave had crested, if you were convinced you had already witnessed the peak of what this once-in-a-generation talent is capable of, you have no clue what is quietly taking shape in Indianapolis right now. The Indiana Fever just detonated a bombshell that has the entire basketball world standing at attention, rattling front offices from New York to Las Vegas, and completely tearing up the rulebook on superstar management. We are talking about a franchise-defining, seismic move that solidifies the organization's future and paints a giant, unmistakable bullseye directly on the Fever's backs. Breaking news: the Indiana Fever have officially activated Caitlin Clark's fourth-year contract option, securing her through the 2027 season and paving the way for a staggering $1.3 million maximum contract extension. But hear me out on this. The money is almost beside the point. The money is just the signature at the bottom of the page. What this extension truly signals is a radical, ground-up reinvention of how the Fever plan to unleash the most dangerous offensive weapon in the history of women's basketball, transforming her into an entirely different kind of nightmare for the 2026 season. Let us unpack exactly what just went down, because the specifics of this deal are jaw-dropping when you stack them against the current financial reality of the WNBA. Under the newly ratified collective bargaining agreement, activating this option fundamentally redirects Caitlin's earning trajectory. Her 2026 salary alone will climb to roughly $528,846. To a casual NBA observer, that number might not turn heads, but within the WNBA ecosystem, this is a full-blown earthquake. It is living proof of the Clark effect in action. She delivered the eyeballs, the record-breaking television ratings, the sold-out buildings from coast to coast, and now the financial architecture of the entire league is physically reshaping itself around the enormous value she generates. By securing this fourth year, the Fever have locked down exclusive negotiating rights for what follows. The maximum extension the league permits, projected at roughly $1.3 million. They are constructing a dynasty in Indiana, and they just handed the blueprint to number 22. They are broadcasting a message to the world, and more critically, to Caitlin herself, that this is her city, her franchise, and her league for the long haul. But here is where the real story begins, and honestly, where it gets downright frightening for everyone else in the league. You do not hand a player that kind of historic financial commitment without wrapping a protective shell around your investment. You do not pour over $1 million into one player and then burn her out. And that brings us to the sweeping, comprehensive tactical revolution currently underway inside the Fever organization. If you track the 2025 season closely, you already know why this overhaul was inevitable. It was a sobering, painful wake-up call. Caitlin appeared in only 14 games. Let that number settle in. 14 games. The physical cost of functioning as the primary ball handler, primary scorer, and the undisputed focal point of every defensive scheme in the league eventually came due. Opponents were picking her up full court from the opening tip-off. They were doubling her aggressively off every screen. They were blanketing her 40 feet from the basket, forcing her to battle through traffic just to field an inbound pass. The sheer energy required simply to get the offense started was completely unsustainable, and it fed directly into the injury problems that derailed her season and denied fans the full experience of watching her operate. The Fever's front office and coaching staff watched that film, surveyed their enormous financial commitment, and arrived at one conclusion. Something had to change, and it had to change immediately. Enter head coach Stephanie White and a completely overhauled offensive identity for 2026. The Fever are flipping everything upside down in terms of how Caitlin Clark is used on a basketball court. We are talking about a wholesale transition to an off-ball system. Let that sit for a moment. The player with the shiftiest handles, the deepest shooting range in the league, and the most electrifying on-ball creation ability is going to spend dramatically less time pushing the ball up the floor. Rather than wrestling through a wall of defenders just to reach half court, Caitlin is being repositioned in a role that echoes the most unguardable elements of Steph Curry's run in Golden State, or Reggie Miller's legendary prime right there in Indiana. The Fever are installing Raven Johnson as the primary initiator of the offense. This is the adjustment that changes the entire equation. Johnson absorbs the physical grind of bringing the ball up the court. She takes the hits navigating a full court press, weathers the contact, and organizes the attack so the table is already set. This is a coaching masterstroke of the highest order. By removing the ball from Caitlin's hands at the start of each possession, they have made her exponentially more dangerous. Consider the mental burden on a defense when Caitlin is the ball handler. All 5 opponents are fixated on her. Every rotation, every weak side defender, every pair of eyes is glued to number 22. But the moment she operates without the ball, everything unravels. Panic takes hold. She will be curling off staggered screens, darting through baseline actions, and moving relentlessly in the half court. Defenders will be forced to fight through bone-crushing screens planted by Aaliyah Boston and the rest of the Fever's front court. Picture yourself as a perimeter defender clawing around a Boston screen, only to realize Caitlin has already drifted to the corner for a clean, uncontested triple. By the time the ball finds her in this new system, she will not be setting up the offense, she will be putting it away. She will be catching in rhythm and firing, or reading a scrambling defense and dissecting terrified closeouts with her elite court vision. This off-ball framework completely dismantles the trap-heavy, suffocating schemes that neutralized her throughout 2025. You cannot run a double team at someone who is not holding the basketball. You cannot corner a shadow. It conserves her energy, shields her from unnecessary physical wear, and positions her to operate at peak, ruthless efficiency in the second and third actions of any given possession. It drops an impossible dilemma in the opposing coach's lap. Do you shadow Caitlin everywhere and surrender wide-open layups to her teammates? Or do you play conventional team defense and hand the deadliest shooter on the floor an inch of breathing room? And if you think this is just theoretical talk, just off-season optimism designed to move merchandise, you clearly were not paying attention to what unfolded in the preseason. The Fever stepped onto the floor against the New York Liberty, one of the most formidable and defensively disciplined rosters in the entire league, and absolutely dismantled them. A 109-91 demolition orchestrated entirely by this new offensive framework. Caitlin logged just 17 minutes on the floor. That is all. 17 minutes of action in a game where her team dropped 109 points on a championship-caliber opponent. Yet, inside those 17 minutes, the efficiency was something genuinely unsettling to observe. 7 points, 3 rebounds, 4 assists. The raw box score might not scream highlight reel, but anyone who watched the footage knows the footprint she left on that game was enormous. The Liberty defense looked completely lost from the opening possession. They had spent the entire week scheming for on-ball Caitlin, programmed to converge on her at the top of the key. The moment she began vanishing off the ball, their rotations crumbled entirely. The gravitational pull she creates without even touching the basketball tore open massive driving lanes for her teammates. Those 4 assists in 17 minutes were not routine passes. They were the direct consequence of New York's defense short-circuiting. Every time Caitlin came off a screen, 2 Liberty defenders instinctively lunged toward her, abandoning their assignments entirely and leaving Fever players standing unguarded beneath the rim for uncontested finishes. It was clinical. It was precise. It looked like a college team, methodically breaking down a high school press. It was a thunderous message to the rest of the WNBA that the Fever have cracked the code, and they have every intention of exploiting it relentlessly all season. But the Indiana Fever's grand design extends well beyond the sidelines. This is a layered, multi-dimensional strategy. This $1.3 million extension and this tactical reinvention are unfolding beneath the most intense spotlight in the history of women's sports. The 2026 broadcast schedule just went public, and it is a staggering, almost incomprehensible reflection of the iron grip Caitlin Clark holds over the sports media landscape. Every single one of the Indiana Fever's 44 regular season games will air on national television. Read that again, because nothing like it has ever existed. 44 games. Blanket national coverage from opening night to the final buzzer. No team in WNBA history has ever commanded that level of exposure. The pressure attached to that reality is immense. The expectations are stratospheric. Every single night, millions of viewers will be picking apart every pass, Every shot selection, every defensive rotation, every sideline reaction. The Fever are no longer simply a basketball franchise. They have transcended the sport itself. They are a traveling cultural event, a primetime television staple, and a genuine mainstream phenomenon, all compressed into one organization. Every building they enter will be standing room only. Every opposing team will circle their Indiana matchup like it is a Game 7. They are going to absorb every opponent's best effort, every single night, with the cameras rolling. This unparalleled media footprint is precisely why the Fever moved to lock her up immediately, without a moment's hesitation. They understand that Caitlyn's worth extends into dimensions that stretch far past the basketball court. She is constructing something vast, something that has outgrown the sport entirely. Just look at the announcement that dropped alongside her contract news. Caitlyn is stepping into the world of literature. She has announced her debut children's book, titled Extraordinary, A Little Extra to Reach Big Dreams, scheduled to hit shelves on the 3rd of November, 2026. This is not a side project. This is not a vanity exercise. It is a precisely calculated move to plant a flag with the next generation of fans, cementing her standing not merely as an athlete, but as a global icon, a brand, and an inspiration for the millions of kids who will grow up dreaming of launching shots from the logo just like her. The Fever's front office grasps the full scope of this picture. They see the book releases, the blockbuster brand endorsements, the cultural gravity that drives daily sports conversation. They understand that committing $1.3 million to Caitlyn Clark is not a gamble. It is the most cost-effective, high-yield marketing investment in the history of professional sports. She generates economic momentum simply by stepping off the team bus. By securing her long-term, Indiana ensures that the center of gravity for the entire women's basketball universe stays firmly anchored in their market. So, what does all of this mean for the 2026 WNBA season? What does it mean for the teams furiously searching for answers in their film rooms? It means we are about to experience the most anticipated, most scrutinized, and most tactically intricate season the league has ever produced. The story of the overwhelmed, pressure-tested rookie is buried. The narrative of the worn-down, injury-plagued sophomore is finished. This is the season of the Empire. This is the season the Indiana Fever stop absorbing the league's punches and start throwing their own. They have erected a fortress around their superstar. They have secured the financial future, locked in the commitment, and completely rewired their offensive DNA to guarantee that Caitlyn Clark remains the most dominant, impossible-to-contain force in basketball. The off-ball system is going to tie opponents in knots. It is going to drive her efficiency metrics into historic territory. And above all else, it is going to keep her rested, healthy, and locked in for a sustained, punishing playoff run. Every other team in the league spent the entire offseason hunched over film, mapping out ways to neutralize the 2024 and 2025 versions of Caitlyn Clark. They built traps, targeted specific defenders, and constructed entire defensive philosophies around stopping her off the bounce. But the genuinely terrifying reality is that version of Caitlyn Clark no longer exists. The 2026 edition is sharper. She is better compensated. She is healthier. And she arrives armed with a tactical framework, engineered specifically by Stephanie White to shred those exact defensive blueprints apart. The contract is signed. The strategy is carved in stone. The preseason delivered a loud, unmistakable preview in New York. Every piece is in position. All that remains is the opening tip. And trust me, you do not want to look away for even a moment from the chaos the Indiana Fever are about to rain down on the basketball world.